Good evening, everyone. Or good afternoon, I guess, not evening yet. Got a lidded box to do for an upcoming class at Woodcraft. This is a piece of cherry that they had over there. Just have a couple really big pieces of this, or long, I should say, not big, but like 3 by 3, I think. I just mark centers. We'll start between centers. Make it round, cut it in half. Cut them 2 in half then. Need a little longer tool rest than that. This will be a little overkill, but I will have to move it then. And I will rough this down with the skew, which sort of seems to be my choice of tools for the roughing part. Oh, that's right, I wanted to use my face shield. Got a lot smaller head than I do. There we go. Now we got it. Close our shower curtain. I'm going to make a big mess anyhow today, but keep it a little bit intact. Bring the speed up a bit. How are you this afternoon? That's why I like the skew for the roughing down part. I mean, it's actually pretty darn quick, I think. Not quite round yet, but close. Clean up that end just a little bit, just so that I can see, because you can sort of see a ghost image. And I think that's round right there. Yep. I don't know whether this is, most of the cherry that most of the lumber that they get is always kiln dried. This doesn't necessarily turn like it's kiln dried, although it's fairly dusty, so it probably is. So now we have a cylinder. We can figure out what we're going to do from there. I know we're definitely cutting it in half, so I don't need So we're at 8 3/4, so 4 3/8 would be centered. I think that's just where we'll go. We'll just go right down the middle with it. And that's more than enough for 2 boxes. So we do, before I get carried away, I better put a 10 on both ends. So that'll be the bottom of both of them. And then we'll cut it in half. And I don't try and go super thin in the middle. It's not worth catching the piece in the face. Because if it breaks through with those live center and everything there, it's going to come back at you. Just like right there, it doesn't, just like the saw, it doesn't want to come back out. So what would happen if you cut through it with the tool? It would bind and do all kind of good stuff for you. Not exciting kind of stuff, put it that way. Everything else now will be on the chuck. I don't really need the point in my live center either. I'll probably bring it back up for the moment, just because I can. And small chuck. Small tool rest too. So we'll clean up an end down here. The parting tool certainly is not a clean cut. We'll just use our spindle gouge for that. Just a simple, nice little straight end cut. Right to center. Still have a little bit left. Now we're nice and clean. Come back around. We're going to need another tenon down here because this will be our lid. Won't be very wide of a tenon. I won't make it real. It'll be bigger than way bigger than what it needs to be, but that's fine. That'll all go away eventually. At least that's my typical design. This is kind of like design on the fly here because I don't really So if we leave, so we start out about 4 1/4. So if we leave a little extra, we'll go 1 1/8. Like I say, this is something I'm going to try and teach to some people, that what I'm finding, the people that are coming to take the classes have no knowledge of anything to do with turning. So I try and make things as simple as I can. Try and explain it as best as I can. Which is a challenge. This time, since there's nothing there, I can take it the whole way off. There's really kind of no point in not taking it the whole way off. While I still have that piece, there's good as time as any to clean up that face. At least some of it. That way we'll know what we got left. At least clean the outside face of it. Don't necessarily need to go the whole way to the center, because we're going to get rid of that. Rid of the sharp edge. And that's what we're going to have left for a base, which is 2 1/2. I'll probably bring that back to 2 1/4, maybe even 2 inches. Because I want to keep it sort of shallow, because like I say, the hollowing part is what will be the most challenging to try and teach those people. So I start with the lid. Once again, we're going to, I guess we could go to the multiple view, maybe. And then we'll be able to see a little bit more what we're doing. You can come in a little bit more on that one. Because right now, a lot of our work is going to be down here. It's interesting. Usually the cherry doesn't, I mean, parting tool is not overly friendly to end grain. That seems a bit worse than normal. So, guess we'll find out. Once again, we're going to clean it up. So that should be nice and cleanly cut. And I think what we're going to do with these people, I know what I normally do. Let's try it once. Like I say, I have 2 blanks, and there's plenty more over there. I'm just going to take my wider parting tool and get down there just a little ways, 1/4 inch, something like that in there, just to get rid of some material. And then we'll make this a curve down to meet that. There's now the real issue doing it with them. Ideally would be just to take our spindle gouge and make a bead. I do have the beading cutters that I could make the bead for them, which I probably will take along. That'll probably be a little bit easier with people that don't know what they're doing. So we'll undercut it a little bit from the top. That's really pretty much good enough for the top. As the rest, then we can give it a dome shape or something up there. It's cutting pretty clean, although it's for cherry that should be almost like glass smooth, and it's not. That's kind of what I'm finding with some of the woods that they have. Hopefully I don't stick my head in front of you too much. What I'm trying to do is eyeball about how wide I can go, because this, you got to remember, this goes down underneath there. I can go out probably a little bit wider than that, I'm sure. And I should probably get the bigger. It was only a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. It'll have a tendency, because now I'm gonna hollow this with the spindle gouge. So the small one, to reach over the tool rest that kind of distance, it's not going to be overly friendly. Spindle gouge will actually bore a nice hole. Right in the center and push in. Pull to the side. And we don't really have to make that super duper deep. Or not deep enough. I want it to go fairly far up in. And then just get, this is just so sort of roughy, so we'll switch to a scraper. To clean up the rest. That should be deep enough. There again, I try and keep it so that it's not quite so deep. It'll make it easier on them. Makes it easier on you too to make lidded boxes. Takes less tools, put it that way. So now I just go to a traditional scraper. Need to raise the tool rest a bit. The reason I raised the tool rest, I want this above center. This is a traditional scraper. So this corner will go straight in. And if I lean over here a little bit, I should be able to make a straight line the whole way down to the bottom. And actually, this is actually sort of sharpened a little bit on the edge too. Although this cherry is just not going to cooperate so well. It's not as smooth as it should be. Which is kind of weird. But I gotta make sure I have enough material left. More importantly, to make sure that I am straight relatively. Doesn't look like I'm totally straight, which is kind of typical for me. So we'll just make another little itty bitty cut, taking more at the bottom than anywhere else. So we'll run back and forth a little bit to see if we can get that to clean up somewhat. Not as pristine smooth as what I would like to see it off the scraper, but the other thing we're going to do is taper this in a little bit so that it sits out here on this outside edge. Razor blade corner goes away. Now the tool rest is too high for the bottom. And the scraper is curved. This has a slight radius to the right, so that when I go down into that corner, it doesn't grab a hold of that. It's not trying to take a 3/4 inch wide bite. I just want the very bottom tiny bit down there flat. I have the other scrapers already out. And then we'll just use another. This is actually a negative rake scraper. Because we don't want to have to. Different one. Because sanding that part in there is kind of next to impossible. Not totally impossible, but it's a whole lot easier if we can get it cut cleanly. I'll just give it a little radius, a little bit of a dome, I think, in the middle. Let's see what we got. It looks fairly decent. Doesn't look like I did not quite taper that enough. And make sure the scraper can't be below center. And taper that just a little bit more. Knock off the sharp edge. Bottom just don't quite look the way I think it should. I'll switch to a different scraper. I get the handle. I did a class this past weekend, or last weekend, and I still don't have everything unpacked. So I'm not allowed to make noise down here at night. So I just sat down here on the workbench for the week. So now today we just get everything out, put everything back, because it's pretty much a month before I have the next class. So now I can work on my own stuff for a couple weeks. Once again, this is another basically traditional type scraper. Single bevel scraper. And this one is really sort of made to do box work. So it'll let me get out there in that corner real nicely. Where the other one I was using didn't quite. It left me a flat out there, which doesn't really hurt anything, but it's still just sort of a flat. So now we have a nice clean cut bottom. Like I say, that's where it's a royal pain to sand. Because I have yet to find any really good 1-inch sanding discs. Ones I got from my sanding guy, he claimed they were good, but they just didn't do a very good job, I didn't think. But since that's bigger, is it big enough? Yeah. It's really almost too big. I really want just a 1-inch one. The 1-inch ones that I got from him, I have one that even has a radius on it, but it just doesn't Doesn't quite work the way I would like it to. For one, it doesn't, I don't know if the sandpaper is getting funky or what, but it doesn't, it likes to tear the Velcro right off the sandpaper. Let me get my cordless drill and we'll try one. It probably won't work, but we'll try it. So otherwise we're left sanding with sheet sandpaper in there, which is kind of almost just as much of a pain. So with slower speed, actually I probably can do it without even spinning it. So to spin it by hand. I did a pretty nice job in there for a change. If only I had the sandpaper mark, but I think that was about 220 or so. This would be like 400, which should be enough for the inside lid. Now it's nice and smooth. Doesn't, like I say, this is not a piece that's going to be sitting on a table for me to sell. This is going to be sitting at Woodcraft for people to look at. So I'm not going to get too carried away with it. I'm going to have to sand that edge because and I don't really like to do that. It's really better if it would cut super clean, because when I sand this, it's going to, chances are I'm going to not be as straight as I would like to be. So we start with some 220. Let's see what we did. Don't look too bad. So we just run through the grits a bit. I might as well, while I'm at it, at least do the bead part. Easiest time to get at it, put it that way. And box making is actually sort of a rather time-consuming thing too. A little bit of 400. And maybe some 6. We'll just go right to 8. You can go up by 50%, so we'll just go right to the 800 and make that super smooth. And that's the inside of our lid. I guess that's still in the bag too. Yeah. good time to finish the inside of a box is when you got it to this point. The lid and the bottom I'll do the same way, where I'll finish it, sort of finish as I go. It would help if I had a glove. But I will use my favorite finish, of course. Would be the Parfix 3408, which is a no odor, slow setting super glue. And we'll just sort of fold our paper towel over, give us a nice little pad, and we'll fold it over one more time to make it less messy. And we'll put a liberal amount on there. Get plenty in there on the very bottom especially. It's going to soak right in on that. And it's still super glue. It will still stick to your fingers. Do this outside edge a little ways up onto the bead. And that's pretty much all there is to finishing the bottom, or finishing the lid. We'll take our dry, the other half of the paper towel, which is still dry, and we'll wipe out the excess. So we only want what's soaked into the wood to stay. And we're gonna keep on moving, so I'm gonna hit it with one shot of activator across about 18 inches away. I just want the mist to land in there. Now we can work on the bottom. So that's where we're at so far. There's a lot of things that you could do on the inside of a lid. You certainly could make some decoration in there or something like that. Like I say, this is just going to be sort of a basic. I'm not even sure that I really want to do that style of lid. Like I say, these people that I'm getting for these classes really know absolutely nothing, so might make it a bit challenging to get them to make a shape, but we'll see. See how many people I get to sign up for it is probably really the big deciding factor. I just did an ice cream scoop class, and I only had like 3 people. So the less people, I've limited my classes now to 4, but when you only have 3, you have more time. You can sort of spend more time on some different things. So what I did, I measured the inside of that lid, or close to it, and then make a tenon down here to fit the lid. And then we can shape this and hollow it. I won't make the lid, probably won't make it fit super tight at this point. Because generally when you hollow out the center part of some of this stuff, it has a tendency to maybe move a little bit. So I'll get down close to my line. I made it, once I got close to the line, I made this a slope or a taper, just to check my fit, see where we're at. And then I can come back, square it up, taper it again. Didn't measure very well. Sort of running a little slim on room. So we're going to make this tenon bigger. Square it up one more time. Just a little taper on the end. We're getting close, so probably square it up. Maybe a tiny taper. And that's probably going to be wouldn't quite fit at that point. So just a little bit more, and that's about how long of a tenon that I want for it. Still doesn't. I think I should have made a little less of a curve up here, but that's okay. So that there, right there, it's going up part way up on it, which is good enough for now. I'm gonna probably reduce, yeah, we can deal with that. So now we got to figure out what we have left. I was thinking I should make that about 2 inches deep. Maybe you should start with the blank that's a little bit longer for them, so that they're not working down beside the chuck, because that'll have a tendency to make them nervous and probably make me nervous, because they'll be banging a tool into it or something. That should actually, could actually fit a little bit tighter than what it does. And get rid of a little material back here. Now I'm closer to the chuck at this point. And we have a center point, so we can make a radius. Sort of make this a little bit ball shaped. I know about there. We're going to come in, undercut that just slightly right there as well. Let's see if I took enough off that way. Not quite. This way, what I'm looking for, I want this to sit sort of over top of that in there. Didn't totally cut that clean. And then just one more little cut in there. And then this time we can go back to our line. And we'll shrink that down just a little bit more. So if I take enough off out here to get it on, it'll probably come back to haunt me, but we'll try it. I probably could force it, but I don't want to break it. That's no fun. And probably that's going to be close enough till we hollow it, and then see where we're going to go from there. So we'll go up here to this top end. much nicer curve on the bottom than I have on the top. We can change that. And we'll finish the bottom a little bit differently. We'll finish that in sort of a jam chuck. So that should be good enough for what we need to do. Make sure it's cutting cleanly, which it is. So now, excuse me, now we can hollow out the inside. And then once we hollow out the inside, then we'll make that fit properly. And we'll do it sort of do it the same way. I use my spindle gouge, and some people say you can do it actually straight up. I come over at about a 45. It will actually drill a hole however deep you really want it to go. And try not to do what I was working on doing there, and that's don't want to make that thin. And we also should stop and take a peek. I don't think I'm close to the bottom yet. Not even close. No, we're not even halfway down. Always side on this. Even this half-inch one is going to want to squeal if I take too much of a bite in there. So over to there. I think the rest we'll probably just do with the scraper. Now the question is, which one do we use? I think we're going to use the... I'm not planning on taking 10 tons of scrapers. This is where over there I'll be able to use... Could use the carbide. I don't have any carbide, but that's something that for the boxes and things like that, you could just use a small or round nose scraper or round nose cutter in there, which should actually do a halfway decent job. You can always go back with a steel scraper when we're done. When you're done, this wants to be on center. It's below center. Let's see if I can do this without banging the camera. I should be able to. But what I'm going to do is, the place you got to watch is right in this area up here. That we got to get below that before we start going out to make this curve out here. If you make that thin up there, then you have trouble. And you can very easily break them. And we're not going for 1/8 of an inch or anything like that in there either. So I would say it's probably more like a quarter, something like that, right up into there, and I've went down, I'm only down into there. So we can just sort of follow that line, clean up the bottom. So as you can imagine, the smoother it can be in there, the better, because you got to stick your fingers in there to try and sand that. And we need to remove. Not thin enough down in there, but I did increase the depths. Still go down more. And the chips have nowhere to go, so you got to stop a lot to remove chips. Here's where you find out whether you're dead center, and we're not. We need to come up a bit more. So I need to be able to get underneath that center point. So all I'm going to do is go under it and lift the handle a little bit, and it'll find dead center, and then it will cut just the same as the spindle gouge did. It will cut straight ahead. And ideally I want it to be a continuous curve in there the whole way around through the bottom. It just makes it easier when it comes to sanding that down in there. And there's still, leave enough material in there because I'm not totally sure I'm thrilled with the shape that I have yet. So I can refine that a little bit. This down here is going to go away. This is going to be the bottom there. But eventually I'll turn this around and put this into a jam chuck to be able to finish the bottom. And then I can reshape a little bit on the outside at that point. And now it's just a matter of getting the inside to what you want it to be, the thickness you want it to be. Doesn't feel too bad. Still feels like I could go deeper. Getting dead center and not leaving the cone down there is probably the most hardest part about making these. It feels like I got rid of it that time. Don't have a real nice curve, but I got rid of the center point, so now I don't need to worry about the center. Just swing the handle. And it will automatically give me a curve. Which it did. And like I say, we're still plenty thick. I don't try and make them super thin. Just not It's not necessary for one. Feels like it's pretty consistent as far as that goes. Could check one more time, see where we're at. So we're there. So that's probably 3/8 of an inch left in the bottom, which is enough because we're still gonna cut this off and we need to undercut that. So once you get all that done, that'll be down to about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. And it can be definitely can be a little heavier at the bottom than anywhere else. So now we get the fun part, sanding the inside. Probably should work on maybe trying to make something. So I know some people that make boxes make like a round sort of a teardrop shape out of something or other, foam or something, so that they don't have to stick their fingers inside the box. I've always just done it this way. If I can get it right, that the sandpaper is off the end of my finger like that, then it curls up and we'll sand the bottom as well as the sides. The biggest place to sand on the sides is like right up in this area here. It's kind of like almost like end grain sticking out, which sort of becomes difficult to actually get it sanded smooth right there. Because it sort of wants to tear it a little bit. A little bit too fast. Your fingers get hot, that means you're going too fast or you're pressing too hard. In this case, you got to press fairly hard because of to keep the sandpaper from running away from you. Should have started with 180 maybe. Might have taken a little less effort to get that out, but I think we got it. The piece is shot. We have a paper towel. I want to get in there and clean out the dust and dirt. Because otherwise we just continue to embed more dirt. Feels like it's really has else that's little bits of paper towel that it chewed off there a little bit. Gets what it was. So now we'll just go through the grits. So we start at 220, we'll go to 320. Put it the right way. Since a piece of sandpaper is folded, if I put it in the other way, it just wants to unravel it. Let's see if we can do it without it unraveling. Like I say, for sort of a demo piece, and I don't make very many of these actually just to even try and sell, because they just don't sell. Where you don't get hardly anything for them to try and sell them. And of course, the more work you put into it, the more you think you should have for them. So they're just a kind of a good, to me, they're a good beginner type project, because you have to do a lot of fitting for the lid, a little bit of sort of hollowing. So it's just kind of a good all-around project, I think. Hard part is to get all the dirt out now, because that's all the further I'm going. That was 400. Now we'll finish fitting the lid. So right now it'll go on there tight, which is actually a good thing right at the moment, that it's that tight. But we gotta finish the inside first. What was my noise? Thank you for the follow. Back over here. And we'll go back to the same thing. Some more of the 3408. This is my go-to finish for pretty much everything, or almost everything. Paper towel folded over. It's a slow setting CA glue, if you've never heard of it. No odor slow setting CA glue, which is wonderful for these kinds of projects because it gives me time to do things. I'll do just the outside edge of that at this point. Put plenty in. I'm trying to sort of saturate the grain. You'll see more of that once we get to the outside. And with the 40-second time delay, as you can see, I'm not really in any giant size hurry to do what I need to do. We'll go in and wipe off any of the excess. That's the one thing with it, you can't leave any of it sitting on the surface, because if it sits on the surface it doesn't know what to do, and it just sits up there and sort of beads up like a nicely waxed car, and then you have to sand that off, and we don't want to do that. Once again, we'll give it a little shot of accelerator in there. Actually, before I get carried away with that, while that sits there and sets up the rest of the way, this is where I usually get carried away and forget, but I need to finish the inside of the lid first. So I'll take that off, set that off to the side. We'll go back to our lid, put it back in, because this material gets buffed. I use Von X to buff it with eventually when it's all finished and done, but there's no way to get buffing pads or anything like that in there, so I just use one of the abrasive pastes. This is the Yorkshire grit, this is the one that I have, so, and this is the fine. It's more than what we need, so rub it in there first before we turn the lathe on. And we'll just work that around. Got way too much in there. Don't want to go too far out around the rim because I don't want it on the part that I don't have finished on the outside. I only want to do the inside. So we'll get a clean, dry bit of paper towel. Get some more of the excess that I got in there off first. And then we'll bring our speed up and we'll polish it. And I put a fair amount of force on when I go to polish it, Like I say, there is abrasive in it. It's a very fine abrasive, but it's still an abrasive either way you look at it. So now the inside of our lid is completely finished. And we'll do the same thing in the inside of the box as well. But I need to let that set up for a little bit before we do the inside of the box. So now we can finish our lid. But we're going to, now, fits super snug. I mean, it takes a lot of force to get that off. So now I can cut up here. I'll probably still bring the tailstock up to start, but I don't really have much of an issue with that wanting to pop off, because I did do a good job this time for a change. A lot of times I had to put a little bit of paper towel in there. But it certainly is not the end of the world if you have to, and you do what you got to do. You can use, 1 ply of paper towel, or if you're really having a bad day, 2 plies of paper towel in there to make that fit, because we want to be able to finish shaping our lid with this intact. I don't want to have to put tape or anything like that on there. At least that's my thoughts. That's the way I was taught years ago to do them. Yeah, we're doing all right. Hope we got a little cooler wherever you're from than what it's been here all week. I just sort of give it a simple dome-shaped top. We're gonna have to trim it down some more because I don't necessarily want the top bigger than the base. That's also the other reason I did not necessarily make that super deep in there. So that when we step back and look, still could be a little bit. That's more about what we want. Because this way, somewhere I saw somebody that, I think it was somebody across the pond or whatever, that does a lot of lidded boxes, and he sort of likes that feature. It also gives you something to get a hold of. I mean, you could certainly put a knob or something on top, I guess. It's just a little bit more, be a lot more extra work. So now we'll just take nice little light cuts. Because here's where, if the lid doesn't fit tight at this point, it becomes a bit of an issue. Kind of not the end of the world, but you can always use a little bit of painter's tape or something like that, just to keep it from wanting to walk off of there. And that is pure end grain, so we need to make sure that we slice it cleanly. It doesn't look like I sliced it as clean as what it could be. So here's where we could be creative. And we should be able to use a scraper on that and actually scrape it cleaner and smoother, or as clean or smoother than we cut it. Just for some reason, it's kind of odd for cherry not to, but there again, like I say, this is some that came from Woodcraft, so I'm sure this has been kiln dried. Some of the bowl blanks and stuff that I'm using over there, it just is not, I don't know whether whoever they get it from, whether they get impatient or dry it too fast and make sort of case harden it. Because even with the bowls that I'm teaching these people to make, it's some of the times it's just like right there. That's sort of some disturbed grain that shouldn't be. Because as you very well know, and it's sort of chippy. So I'm not really worried about that because I will round that over a little bit. I'm most interested in getting rid of any of the grain that stood up, which I believe we were successful that time. Like I say, it's, I don't know, it's kind of different, weirdly different, I guess you'd say. I might as well start with the edge, slow the speed down so we don't burn things. I mean, that has to be rounded over anyhow. And then we can finish sanding down in here, or sand down here because I didn't sand that at all. We did do the bead before we switch things over, but that looks good. That just that little bit of sand in that, and that's only that's 220. So it's like not like the end of the world that it is not cooperating like it should be. It just kind of causes a little bit of extra finesse kind of thing, which will definitely make it more of a challenge in a classroom setting. I did got one person the last time in the class, that in the ice cream scoop class, said that I was touching his work too much, and I'm like, well, we don't want to be here for 3 hours waiting for you to try and sand the stuff out that you messed up. So, but he went home with a nice looking ice cream scoop, so he was happy at that part. So wonders of box making is you gotta do things in stages, because otherwise, I mean, you could do the lid off of the base. You just have to make another sort of jam chuck with a tenon on to be able to hold onto the lid. Maybe if you had the right size jaws to go on the inside and hold on to it. But this is just, to me, this is the easier way of doing them. And this is the way I learned to do it from the start. So I kind of stuck with it. And then watching other people make them, like the Cindy Droz of the world. I mean, this is exactly what she does. You do the lid, you fit the lid to the base, and you go from there. Of course, when she does it in one of her demonstrations or live or whatever, she doesn't bother to finish anything on the inside, because there again, that takes more time, and people are not necessarily interested in watching somebody sand. But I'm not doing a demonstration that's getting paid for or something like that, so I'm more interested in ending up with a finished piece when I'm done. a little bit of random order with the 800, especially on the very top, because there's going to be some radial scratches in there from sanding like that. So if we just go around there in little circles, basically, that just wipe them away. So now we can finish that. You get the gist. You do a little bit of work, a little bit of finishing at one time. That's kind of the wonders of using the super glue to finish like that, is that I can keep going. As if you were going to use some sort of an oil finish or something like that, then you'd have to, do a little bit, stop and wait, or try and finish the whole thing at the end, which would be rather challenging to get on the inside of things like that. End grain's going to take more, that's why I started there. We'll go up over that bead. Try not to go too far up over it, because where there was already super glue on there, it's going to want to set up quicker up there for me than anywhere else. So that it's basically going to be the little top part of that bead. So get that wiped off first. But it doesn't, I like this stuff. I'm not saying that just because I have a website that has it on. I found this stuff about 4 or 5 years ago, and it became an issue of being able to get it. So I managed to get some contact information for the company that makes it, and they're like, well, yeah, we pretty much sell it through private distributors, so there you go. I'm like, I'm all over it. A little spray of activator. Use my gloved hand to take it off, and now we have a finished piece. It's dull. It's not shiny like the inside because we didn't buff it. So we buffed that at the end. So now we need to go back after you get this stinking glove off my hand. It's just warm enough here that in my shop is in my basement, so it is climate controlled. So now we're going to go back and we're going to make that tenant fit the lid. And this will be another one of them sort of a little bit time consuming, because I'll just basically just touch it, because I don't really want to. There we go. So it still takes force to get on there. So it looks like, and I step back, it looks like there's a little bit of a hump back here. And I think that should do it. Yep. It's sort of a suction fit lid at this point, but I normally don't really like to sand them too much, but I will hit it with a little bit of like 400, and we'll just gently go over the top. A little bit of 400, take that sharp edge off there. And we can you can go up twice the grit sizing in sandpaper at one time if you need to. So we'll just go right to 800. And now that should be polished smooth, that our lid slides on. Has a little bit of slop, which I'd rather them have a tiny little bit of slop than be so tight that you have to force it on and force it back off. So now we can look at our shape. Quit putting your sticky fingers on there. Forget that's end grain. I need to pick this up from the side grain because there's more material went into there. So a little bit of the dust is trying to stick to that. It's not a big deal because it's only sitting on the surface. It won't necessarily suck it down in. So now we can finish up on our shape a little bit, because I'm not quite happy with that. So I think this curve needs to be a little tighter. Of course, here's where the outside could become smaller than the inside, but that's why I did not make it super thin. I will. Thanks for stopping by. Ah! Don't hit the camera. Not get silly. So once again, we're back to sanding some more. And this time I should have gotten a piece. I didn't get it out. This time we'll probably start with a little bit of 180 on the outside here. Because all the playing around I did, it's just not quite. I can do a little bit of final shaping to it as we go. Smooth out that curve a little bit, and I don't really have to get down in that groove. Be super concerned about it because we are going to flip this around again. And we will make a little jam chuck. If we're really lucky, well, it's probably too small already. Let's find something. So we'll just go through the grits, finish it. Wipe off the dirt. More importantly, wipe off the excess grit that probably was still laying on that surface from the previous sanding grit. Nothing finer than getting to the end to figure out there's still some 180 or something grit scratches in there because there was some of that grit left behind and it just kept getting embedded more and more each time. As we're not getting down in there, I can see a definite line down in there. Like I said, I'm not really too concerned about that. Actually, I won't have to finish this on the outside just yet either. So, last but not least, a little bit of 800. And 800, I probably should touch that edge right there, because that would have, all the cutting and sanding and everything else sharpened that top little corner up. So that's our box almost done. Set that somewhere else, because we will Need our tailstock here in a bit. So once again, I've seen people grab a hold of, like they would just take this and flip it around and put it in their chuck and grab a hold of it with their chuck. If I clamp down on that right now, it's going to put 8 little marks in there, which I don't want to do. So where did I put that piece? Use a nice piece of spalted maple. Big enough, soft enough as well. This is helping a guy out a little bit yesterday with some of that sharpening some tools and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, you'll know whether your tools are sharp and you're cutting properly if you can cut through spalted material. And this is, some of it's really heavily spalted to where I can take my fingernail and actually make lines in it without really any force at all. So once again, we're going to go back to our dividers. This time we need to set it, if anything, we want to go a little bit smaller than this opening here. Ooh, hold that thought. Getting ahead of myself. I didn't polish the inside of that. Good thing I'm talking a little bit more than I normally do. Because if I don't polish that on the inside now, it never get done. So back to our abrasive paste. Smear it around a bit in there, and then we turn on, work it around good. It's kind of interesting stuff to use in a way. You can actually hear it, sounds like it's scratching it. When the sort of the scratchy sound goes away, or mostly goes away, that's when you've used up all the powdered abrasive in there. And then we can get a bit of cleaner paper towel, stick it in, bring our speed up a little bit. Don't need to get super crazy. It's about 1200 RPM, something like right there. You get it up too high, your fingers are gonna not like you very well. So now our inside is finished. Now I can go back to where I was at. So now we can make our jam chuck. So once again, that piece does not like to spin very true on the lathe, but it doesn't matter, because what I'm going to do is mark this. I'll clean up this face a little bit. As we do things, can actually go back to our spindle gouge. So we need a little bit of need some room in there. Stay shy of the line. And then from there we'll go back to our traditional scraper. And I gotta switch back. I only have one shorter 5/8 inch handle for these scrapers, because I don't have any really giant size ones. I do have one to do the bottom of a bowl, but that one I will put into the big long handle. But Here, we don't need leverage, we need finesse. Trued up that a bit. And now we're sort of just like fitting our box. We're going to make that the same way. If it didn't fit, I can go sort of go full depth somewhat. Just come out, take just another little whisker off. I probably really shouldn't have went full depth, but I don't think I was even close. We're getting closer than what I thought. Actually, we're a fit. But we need to go just a shade bit deeper because I really want that to sit flush in against that. And actually could be a shade bit tighter than what it is, but it will work. Once again, a little bit of paper towel in there. Certainly don't hurt anything. Still not. I see what the issue is. Wasn't that the issue? The issue is that it's hitting here more than it bottoming out. There we go. Now it's nice and snug. Yeah, nice and snug up against that. Now it's not. It still has some. This tenon is not as straight, or that in there isn't quite as straight as it could be. So if we carefully take our paper towel, this is where it pays to have fingernails, because you try and get, most paper towels are 2-ply, so if I take 1-ply of it, that should be enough. As you see, I hit it pretty hard to put it on there. So now it's snug. It shouldn't come off. I will still bring the tailstock up to do the majority of the work, but eventually we'll get rid of the tailstock and we'll only be relying on that there. And if it would come loose or what have you while you're working on it like that, it's not really the end of the world, unless it really goes flying and bangs into something really, really hard. So at this point, it's a matter of getting rid of material. So I can actually go back to my parting tool. That's going to be the quicker way of getting a lot of this away. I guess if you really wanted to, maybe you could even make this part of the base, but I don't normally do that. Definitely don't want to go the whole way into where we want to be with the parting tool, because we know that's not going to cut it clean. It's just a way of getting rid of some material quickly. So now we'll go back to our spindle gouge. Get rid of that corner. And now we can work on getting it nice and smooth. Drop right into that little ledge that was already there. Take our time. Go right to the center. make one final really light refining cut to the middle, close to the middle anyhow, put it that way. Get a ruler, go across and make sure we could be a little bit more concave than what we are. It is slightly concave, but I want it to sit right on this outside rim, is my philosophy. You take this down a little bit more. I'm not going to take it the whole way down at this point yet, because once again we're going to go back and we're going to sand, because we can see a white line right there. So I'm going to hit that, slow it down, hit that little bit with 400 right there, because I think that's as far back as I needed to go right there. At the bottom, let's look and make sure it's cutting cleanly. It is. It should be able to start around 320. Could possibly go back even to 220. We'll sand about as far in as what we can at this point. I'm not going to spend a ton of time sanding that. And that's all the... let's finish out this outside. Because this part of this sanding right here, I'm putting pressure going that way. To do the very bottom, I'm only putting pressure going towards the headstock, so it's not trying to pull it back off. So as we sand this smooth on the outside, then we're good. And then we'll get rid of this last little bit in the center. And then we'll finish up the bottom. And I'm not going to try and cut it off right up tight against the box right now. It's much safer and easier to stay out of the way a little bit, so that we don't take and get too rambunctious and tear a hole in the bottom of it. So stop spinning, so it's there, even though it didn't fall off. So now we can just make little itty bitty cuts. And make sure that we don't have anything too out of whack. Cherry just that's weird. It certainly is not cutting as cleanly as I would like to see it. With a nice, super slow. Go to the center. Pretty much stop and think about it, and it'll cut through it. And that should have left me a nice, cleanly cut surface in there, which it did. Now we have total access to the bottom. I say I probably waste my time sanding out further. It's probably just as easy. Slow it down. To sand this all at one time. It's definitely a little white ring out there. Little white ring that wants to stay out there. So we'll just make that, if it stays there through the grits, we'll just make that a little area where we do something. Because we'll put some lines or something on the bottom of this, just so that somebody knows that you cared enough to do something with the very bottom of a piece. And you got to have a place to sign it. You notice I work more in the middle because it's hardly spinning, and then go out. Right through the grits. We're just about done, so it's 2 hours. Told my wife it wasn't going to be long. It's one of the reasons I set my time. Well, I got laundry to switch around, but I try and keep track of the time it takes me to do a project like this, because in order to try and teach it to people, you want them to be able to get the project done in the 3-hour time frame. So like I say, when I do this in a class, they're definitely, or probably not, they're going to do a straight-sided box. There will be none of the what we just did here. I think just for laughs, I think we'll put a couple tiny little beads on the bottom of it. And I should not have done it that way. Let's come in. Come in about there. That might have just created me more work than what it was worth. Yeah, you cut it all right. I just freshly sharpened those beading cutters. There's also a pyramid tool. These are all D-way. So if I go in there with that, I can sort of I go right into the bottom of the bead, and I'll just sort of round that over a little bit. And that sort of is going to give me the illusion that there is many beads in there, when in fact there is only 2. But that just gives it a decorative look for the bottom, which I like. So, in order to finish the majority of this, I pull it off. This fit tight enough. Right about like that. Not up tight against there, because now I'll just go ahead and finish this bottom. I may not finish the total bottom though, because I should sign that. But it doesn't really matter much. Like I say, it'll just sit over on the shelf at Woodcrafts, just to show people that, you know, what a lidded box is, so that, you know, if they want to take the class, then they're not saying, well, you know, people think of a box as being square, but lidded box in wood turning is round. So that's what we'll do with it. We'll make it round. Back to the same old thing, 3408. Yeah, I'm not going to do the bottom. I want to write on there, so I'll do that last. Nice saturating coat. I want it totally saturated, and then we'll wipe off the excess. And this actually will need to sit for 24 hours is the best way to do it so that it's totally cured, because it will cure in 24 hours. And then that's the time to actually buff it. Because if I go after that, especially the lid, if I was to go after that with the buffing wheel right now, it'll suck some of whatever's below the surface that still might not be totally set up. It'll create that vacuum and suck it right back to the top. Especially seeing how I can see right now I got some sawdust on the top that looks like it might have adhered on the lid. Like I say, wipe it dry. And the issue is going to be, get another glove. So if I touch it, because I don't want to activate it just yet, because I didn't do that little tenant part in there. So if I touch it with my bare hands, super glue is activated by moisture. So even though I probably have very dry hands, there's still enough moisture there that it would stick to my fingers. So I'll just do it this way. Use the glove, because it doesn't adhere to the glove very well. So we'll just get a little bit on a paper towel so I can do that tenant. Get back to strictly overhead. Yeah, be able to see a little bit better what I'm doing. So on the tenant, the end grain behind the tenant, so that everything is covered. Get rid of that little bit of paper towel. And once again, we just wipe off the excess. It is still super glue. It's still, that paper towel just wanted to stick right fast to my finger, because there was still a little super glue left on there. Make sure there's none there. And all I'm going to do is hold it on my thumb, give it activation on that side and that side, and we're done. Let it sit 24 hours, and then we will buff it from there. This lid, before I buff it, you can sort of see it's got like some whiteness to it, and also has some roughness to it. So once it's totally cured, I'll take a little bit of 800 grit sandpaper, because what it's done is raised the grain on the end grain. So I just take and lightly sand that with 800, and then we will hit it with the buffing wheel. There it is. Simple little lidded box. And that concludes the show for the day, I guess you'd call it. Because I'm sure that was my wife or children texting me, it's time to go get some dinner. Anybody have any questions, comments? Feel free, because we are not going to stick around. We've got to go. See if we can find anybody to raid into. First we'll go back over to YouTube and stop that one.